Animals may not even know that winter exists because they enter hibernation before winter starts. And then they emerge from hibernation when it's already spring is out there. It's like a time travel.
Wow. So they've basically created their own Florida. Vladyslav, great to meet you.
Great to meet you too, Adam. Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
I've been wondering for longer than I can remember if humans could ever hibernate. And I could never find a good answer to this question until I stumbled across a wonderful article you wrote. I have a lot of questions for you, but I guess the starting one is, how does hibernating work?
Okay, let me explain what hibernation is. So we have to step back and first talk about a concept called torpor. Torpor is a state of reduced metabolism, reduced metabolic rate when all processes in the body slow down. There is a spectrum of this hypermetabolic state, and we subdivide them into seasonal multi-day torpor called hibernation. This is what ground squirrels do or bears. And animals can cool down, their body temperature can reduce a lot, sometimes even below zero, and it lasts for many, many days, even months. And then another form of torpor is so-called daily torpor. And this is usually small rodents do. They just cool down and spend just a few hours in this state of reduced metabolism. So there's a spectrum of state, and so they also have somewhat different mechanisms.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful. If an organism is in this state of torpor, or if it's cooled down, does that mean it actually ages at a slower rate?
There is some indication that indeed those organisms who spend time in torpor, they age slower rate. So maybe one thing I want to mention is that hypothermia, decreased body temperature, is not a prerequisite of torpor, neither of hibernation. So there are some tropical animals that can hibernate at high temperature because they wouldn't cool down, it's warm. They just decrease their metabolic rates. And also bears, their body temperature decreases by just a few degrees, so hypothermia itself is not important. What is important is the speed of metabolic reactions.
Got it.
It slows down. Yeah.
And how is that different from a medically induced coma?
These are worlds apart, although superficially it may look similar. And in general, we should look at torpor or hibernation on a spectrum of states. Our body, our brain can assume many, many different states. Coma is a pathological state. Coma usually occurs as a result of trauma, brain damage, and this is when you lose consciousness, you become completely unresponsive, your vital functions need to be maintained artificially. Hibernation, in contrast, is a completely physiological state, exquisitely regulated, very finely controlled, and animals are very responsive during hibernation. It's really, really important that even if you are in this state, you are still monitoring what is happening, right? If there is a predator or if there is a wildfire, and you cannot wake up from coma, but you can from hibernation.
So in that sense, hibernation is like extended sleep, not like a coma.
Okay. This is when it becomes even more complicated and even more interesting.
I hoped it would.
Yeah, because we define sleep by brain and behavior-centric criteria. So there are criteria for sleep. You are becoming less responsive. You are not moving. Everything is about the brain. But we define hibernation or torpor based on your bodily physiology by metabolic rate. So although we know that all animals, or most animals that were studied, they enter hibernation via sleep. So sleep is like a gate that opens and allows the animal go into the hibernation. It's very difficult to compare. It's almost like a categorical confusion. So you're comparing two states which are defined using different sets of criteria. So whether it is extension of sleep or not is not an easy question.
Let's talk about why a human would want to hibernate. I was telling my wife that I was excited for this conversation, and I've always wanted to know if we could hibernate. She's like, well, but why would you want to do that? And I have a list of reasons. They are probably incomplete, and you've thought about this a lot more carefully than I have. So make your case for why a human should want to hibernate.
Humans, like many other animals, like to explore a variety of states. We don't like where we are. We don't like our normal wakefulness. We take drugs, we do all kinds of crazy stuff to change our mind, right? And to change our what happens in the body. To me, this is really, really important motivation. You can look at it from different perspectives, almost like as a form of escape from adversities, for example. And this is normally what animals are using it for. it's not a response to a problem that's already happening, right? So animals usually anticipate changes in the environment and they start preparing themselves, and they're ready to enter torpor before it gets cold or dark or there's no food, etc. It's really a remarkable adaptation to prepare for and deal with adversities. Humans are a bit strange in this regard, so we like to be in control of nature, of our surrounding, right? So we are changing the environment to make ourselves happy. Animals do another way around. So they enter the state where they're in a thermal equilibrium with the environment. They stop being agents, and this is how they survive. They survive by annihilating themselves, right? So by being as close to death as possible.
That's fascinating. Okay, so curiosity is one reason why I might want to hibernate. Is it's a chance to explore something different. Escaping or avoiding adversity is another. What else is on your list? Why else might I want to do that?
Hibernation is very often encountered, as you know, in science fiction. So there is basically no way we are going to make it to Mars. You run into a number of logistical problems. So from psychological problems, right? So if you're in a very small confined environment with other people who you get to hate sooner or later, you may want to disconnect. And of course, it is impossible to take all the supplies, all the oxygen and water and everything and food for an extended period of time. And then you're dealing with radiation. And we know that hibernating animals are actually quite resistant to hibernation or simply to weightlessness. So your bones and your muscles would atrophy when you're in hibernation. You're protected in many different ways. And these are more kind of exotic application of where human hibernation can be taken eventually.
So this is for anyone who loved the book Project Hail Mary or the movie Passengers. This is basically the scientific explanation of why we need to hibernate if we want to travel long distance through space.
And there are also many and varied applications, potential applications of hibernation on Earth. And here I'm talking about some clinical applications where you would want to slow down metabolism. And this could be some of the very same reasons. For example, even for cancer treatment, when you apply some very toxic substances or radiotherapy, and hibernation could offer a very, very, very good way to reduce side effects.
That's exactly what I was wondering, because my first thought from a medical perspective was that if there are diseases that we think might be treatable in the future, that maybe hibernating slows down the extent to which cause major harm to the body, and in turn then more likely that somebody survives in order to get the treatment or the cure. And you're saying not just that, but also the cures themselves might be less poisonous if they're administered while somebody's hibernating.
Yeah, exactly. So this is very, very easy to imagine, and this is definitely neuroprotective. When you do cardiac surgery, you do this under hypothermia, and this helps to survive hypoxia for much longer, right? When you need to stop the heart, stop perfusion. The same application can be when you deal with stroke, with brain damage. You need to slow down metabolic processes, and then there is less room for accumulation of damage and so on.
We don't know how to get humans to hibernate, but you do have some hunches, some hypotheses.
Well, we don't even know how animals hibernate, and that's a really, really big mystery, big question. But we don't have to go that far. But we don't really know how we sleep. Sleep is still a big mystery. We spend 1/3 of our life in this very bizarre state, if you just think about that, which you completely take for granted, but we still don't know how to induce normal physiological sleep. So now, state of hibernation, which is much more dramatic, much more interested, and much less understood. I think we really need to study sleep more in order to understand better how to hibernate and to understand how many animals, we keep discovering new species in nature that use hibernation and torpor. They are experts in that, but we don't know how they do it.
What's your best approximation so far of how?
My best approximation, and also this probably shared with other colleagues, that it is actually some sort of continuation of sleep process. We do know that some brain mechanisms that regulate sleep, or as far as we know, those that regulate sleep, they overlap with the very same circuits in the brain that regulate metabolism, that regulate energy homeostasis. Animals enter torpor enter hibernation via sleep.
Can animals dream while they're hibernating? The same way we think some animals do dream while they're asleep. Do you have any physiological data to point in a direction on that?
Right, so we are dreaming basically all the time. The initial idea was that we dream only during REM sleep, REM sleep. Now we know for sure that it's not true. Dreaming can occur throughout the night. It can happen in all sleep stages. Dreaming or some sort of dream-like mentation can happen during wakefulness. In fact, we spend most of our life dreaming. So the question is, what do we call a dream? What is a dream? So it can be very vivid, very emotional, very, very colorful. Mostly it is visual, sometimes very much more rarely it can have some other modalities involved, like olfactory dreams. They're very rare, but they're possible. But they happen throughout, and they happen even in very deep sleep stages. Hibernation is a very interesting case. So I imagine that in a very, very deep hibernation, when the body and the brain are below zero and everything is completely suspended. This is where the suspended animation terminology comes from. There is probably very little mental activities or any activity. You know, animals can stop breathing for half an hour. But there is very, very few heartbeats happening per minute. There is very little activity in the brain, but limited evidence suggests there is always some residual activity in the brain. So I think up to a certain point, it is very likely that there is some sort of mentation happening, some sort of dream-like activity. What is it like is a very interesting question. Maybe something like dreaming that is sometimes reported during anesthesia. It's also relatively uncommon, but dreams can happen while being anesthetized, and I cannot exclude that some sort of dreaming can happen during state of hypermetabolism.
Fascinating. How do you study this? Do you hook up electrodes to animals before they dig a hole in the ground? Like, I'm trying to get an image of what it even looks like to study. You probably don't do a lot of research with bears.
Some of my colleagues, they actually do research in bears. And there is some more work in progress I'm aware of, where scientists actually managed to implant some thermistors into a bear under anesthesia to record even brain waves and body temperature, whole range of physiological parameters while they were hibernating in the den. But as you can imagine, it's tricky, it's a bit dangerous, and these data are incredibly precious. But scientists have been recording from hibernating animals in various forms for a long time. You can take that device that can measure the content of oxygen the animal takes in and CO2 the animal exhales. You put those tubings in the burrow where you suspect the hibernating animal might be sleeping. You can record their metabolic rates, but by using these readouts of how they breathe, how much oxygen they consume. And it's very, very well established that when animals hibernate, they consume much less oxygen. It can go to a small fraction of the normal oxygen they consume. In the wild, of course, it is also difficult because you have to find the animals. They're really hiding very well when they hibernate. And therefore, a lot of research, a lot of our knowledge about hibernation comes from lab studies. Some labs have ground squirrels or Arctic squirrels in the labs. In my lab here in Oxford, I have hamsters. There is a species called Hungarian hamsters, the same size as a mouse, maybe a little bit bigger. They're much, much cuter. This everybody here agrees that they're incredibly cute. These hamsters, they are not hibernators, they're torpedators. So what they do, they enter a state of torpor lasting a few hours every day. And all you need to do for these animals is to shorten their day. In my lab, there are two rooms. One is, we call it summer room, another winter room. In the summer room, day lasts 16 hours and night is only 8 hours. In the winter room, it's another way around. So there's a very short day, very long night. So hamsters who live in the summer room, they reproduce, they're rather brownish in color, they're fat. When we move them to winter room, they think it's winter. They start losing weight, which is very interesting. It's actually very unusual. It's different from many other animals who actually fatten themselves in preparation for winter. These animals lose weight, they turn white, and they start entering the state of torpor. And we record them with thermal imaging cameras. So we have the cameras above their cages, And normally you see like a spot which is warmer than the environment. But when they enter torpor, they disappear. They become the same temperature they surrounded. Sometimes you look at the screen and where is the hamster? And you don't see the hamster because became one with the world.
It's such an interesting phenomenon, right? That they adapt so naturally. And I guess this speaks to something that you were referring to earlier that really piqued my interest, which is like hibernating is a remarkable adaptation, especially when it involves proactive planning. It's almost unfathomable to me that a squirrel has the instinct to go and start gathering nuts and then to burrow and dig this hole underground. How does an animal know to do that?
Yeah, this is a great question. Hibernation probably is quite an ancient adaptation because we know that it is very widespread among mammals, very different lineages, but it is also common that some of the close relatives of those animals that hibernate, they lost this capacity. It may be related to what we call a circadian clock. So there could be some sort of periodicity built in our physiology that allows us or other animals to anticipate predictable changes in the environment. In analogy with the circadian clock is about anticipating day and night. It's not about responding when night happened already, right? The animals perceive some very subtle changes in the environment, and this triggers into motion like very, very dramatic physiological adaptation. Animals may not even know that winter exists because they enter hibernation before winter starts. And then they emerge from hibernation when it's already spring is out there. It's like a
Wow.
time travel.
Wow. So they've basically created their own Florida.
Yeah. It's really, really amazing adaptation.
Let's do a lightning round. I've got some rapid fire questions for you. What is the worst advice that people give on sleep?
To get 8 hours of sleep, because it's much more complicated than that. We have very different requirements, and it is more important not only how much sleep, but also your sleep quality and also time when you get your sleep.
As an expert in this area, what is your favorite recommendation for how to sleep better that most people have not heard before?
Try not to worry about not being able to fall asleep or not getting enough sleep. People may get over obsessed, over worried. If anything, it gets your sleep worse. And if I may, I can do another one. Be careful with various gadgets that you use to record sleep, because most of them are not properly validated. They give you something that may not necessarily be true or easily interpretable. You get some kind of very wrong idea about how much deep sleep you get, whatever it is. It's a very kind of suboptimal terminology. And there's always an issue of privacy, right? So if you are monitoring your sleep and everything that is happening in your bedroom is being recorded, and then who knows where those data go and who is analyzing it. So this is something that's sometimes under appreciated.
As public awareness of the importance of sleep has gone up, I have noticed people getting much more stressed about, what if I don't sleep well tonight? And, oh no, I didn't get enough hours, or I was short on my deep sleep or my REM sleep. And the cascade of anxiety and stress that creates, I've wondered often, is that actually worse than the negative effects of losing sleep itself?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you share some of those concerns.
Yeah, exactly. We need the right balance. So it's really important, some awareness, appreciation of sleep and importance of sleep. We don't care about sleep up to the moment when we notice that we actually don't sleep well, which is paradoxical. It's really amazing. So we spend 1/3 of our life in this very interesting state. We are completely excited that it is there for our benefit, like we own sleep, right? So, but then I don't think it's the right way to look at sleep, because we don't own it. We don't have control, right? So you don't have a choice. You must sleep. You're programmed like that squirrel to spend 1/3 of your life in this very strange state for reasons we don't understand. We have many theories, but as some of my colleagues actually like to think that sleep is our default state. We spend our life asleep. We only wake up to do our business, get food, a few other things, and then we go back to sleep. This is a very refreshing way to look at sleep.
What an unusual way to think about it. It's never crossed my mind before that sleep could be the default and awake is the alternative to that.
This idea has been around actually for a few decades. It's not very popular because, we spend, again, such a long time asleep that you want it to be there for a reason. Otherwise, it seems like such a tremendous waste of time, right? And this is why we have so many ideas that it benefits your memories, it helps you to deal with emotions, cleans your brain from some metabolic. There are quite a few theories around, but we should be also aware that there may be other alternative interpretations, like sleep being a default state. This probably explains why animals sleep in so many different ways, right? Like why elephants would sleep only, 4 or 5 hours. Some other animals may sleep most of the time. It's very difficult to reconcile with the idea that sleep is there for just one specific reason.
Yep, that resonates. Well, you've certainly validated my resistance to wearing any kind of device that tracks my sleep, both because I've had my own questions as a non-expert about how reliable and valid the information is, but also I just don't want to get a bad night's sleep and then look at a device and then be even more stressed from the feedback that I got than I already was.
Your experience of your sleep can be very, very different from objective measures. We look at the difference between wake and sleep based on movement, as I was saying, based on brain waves, or depending on what exactly you're monitoring. But there is a huge discrepancy between objective and subjective perception of sleep. There is a condition called paradoxical insomnia or sleep state misperception, when patients wake up after objectively decent night of sleep, and they claim that they could not sleep a minute, or they slept very poorly. They would wake up every 5 minutes, and based on the objectively collected data, they had a normal sleep, or relatively normal sleep. What is interesting here is that we created this label for the condition. We call it sleep state misperception. So we blame the patient. You don't know what your sleep is like, but we know better because we record it objectively. But maybe our objective measures of sleep are actually not great or suboptimal if there is such a big discrepancy.
Is there a hot take that you have related to sleep? Something you believe that most of your colleagues would disagree with you on?
Yes, of course. I think everybody must have some ideas. And to me, sleep is still a very open question. So we don't have a theory for sleep. So it's also refreshing to think about that in our field, everybody is doing something different or something slightly different. You go to a sleep conference with colleagues, you meet colleagues who worked on sleep for decades, and you discuss with them what sleep is. This is just to give you an idea. Sometimes we don't even agree on what is it exactly that we are studying. What is shared between all theories or hypotheses for sleep function is that sleep benefits the individual who sleeps. Sleep is for us. I think we need to be also open to the possibility that true benefits of sleep are not confined within the body of the individual, but they can be found at a higher level. Because when I sleep or you sleep, it has some implications for your world around you, right? So I stop bothering others. I give room to other individuals or other species which inhabit the same ecosystem. So it creates like temporal niches. So when we sleep, it has implications not only for ourselves, but also for the dynamics of the ecosystem. And I think we need to also look into this possibility.
Oh, that's interesting. Sleep might be adaptive for social functioning, or for a group more so than it even is for cognitive and emotional benefits for the individual.
For example, that when two closely related species occupy the same ecological niche, they can be temporally displaced. And this is how they don't compete. So one species is sleeping, another can do whatever they want. Or predators and prey, they can kind of chase another in time. So the prey would go outside when predators are sleeping, and predators would have to be up when their prey are up to be able to find them and catch them.
This is yet another idea that has just never occurred to me before, the idea that animals could chase each other in time. How interesting.
Yeah, there are some studies on that. So this has been established. There are some modeling work which suggests that, yeah, it does have this temporal organization of behavior has very important implications on the evolution of the ecosystem.
Well, that's bringing us closer to my world. Let me turn the microphone over to you and ask you if you have a question for me.
What do you think sleep is for?
Oh, I'm not qualified to answer that question. That's why I brought you onto this show. The metaphor that's always made the most sense to me is that sleep is how we recharge the brain's batteries. It's a restorer of energy, but also a resetter of attention. And I'm sure there are many reasons sleep exists. The other one that I've found really persuasive is the idea that sleep is a memory consolidator, and it helps us forget things that we don't need to actually retain, but also then focus on and maybe organize things that are important.
Yeah.
Did I pass your quiz?
Yeah, these are very popular ideas. There is definitely some truth to that. It's very intuitive. This is why probably these ideas are so popular.
I worry a lot about people, sort of clinging to the intuitive and obvious explanations as opposed to some of the factors that might not be as easy to process, but still could be quite important. And I think that's one of the reasons I was so fascinated by your work.
I think we need to be more creative, more brave, more courageous, because we are dealing again with such a massive phenomenon. Like all animals sleep, as far as we know, all animals sleep, and it remains unexplained. There is really something wrong. Maybe we should be starting asking not why do we sleep, but why it's so difficult to answer this question, right? There is something that we are missing. Maybe it is about how we define sleep, how we approach sleep, because we define sleep by what it is not rather than what it is. So it's really elusive. And also we apply kind of our human perspective, and we are trying to explain how, I don't know, penguins or reptiles sleep based on our understanding of how sleep it is from our own perspective, how humans sleep. And this is when it breaks down. And this is why I think we discover most interesting things when we look at unusual species, unusual animals sleeping in very, very different ways.
And I have to tell you, I think I understand, obviously, that sleep has all these positive effects, and I do tend to sleep 7 to 8 hours most nights. My own behavior, I think, reflects that I really appreciate the need for it. I hate it. I think sleep is a massive waste of time. I think the budding longevity movement that's trying to figure out how to extend our lifespans in the short term might be better served by trying to figure out how to reduce the need for sleep. Because if we could eliminate the need, right, if we could undo that programming, we would essentially extend our conscious experience by a third. It's one of the most frustrating things for me in a typical day that I lose a third of my day that I could spend creating, contributing, learning, connecting with other people, having conscious experiences, and sleep interferes with all of that. And I know I need it, but I don't want to need it. So tell me, is it possible that we could reduce or eliminate the human need for sleep one day?
Yeah, this is a very provocative question. Very interesting, very radical question in a way. I have a slightly opposite perspective. I think our lifespan is so long because we sleep. So 1/3 of our life is not lost time. It's part of our life, something we don't understand, and something that is there for a reason. So there could be, again, like a simple reason. In analogy to hibernation, and sleep can just keep you out of trouble when it's dark. So this is another very interesting popular idea. If you were wandering around when it's dark and you don't see well and there are predators, your life would have been much shorter. I promise you. So it's...
Wait, is that true though? Because it also seems to me that you're in an extraordinarily vulnerable state when you sleep, and that might make you an easier target for predators.
Yes, this is another popular idea, which I don't think I really agree, because all you need to do is to hide well or climb on a tree, right? So this is what animals do. Scientists sometimes talk about obligatory sleep, something that like a core sleep, something that you must obtain. It's non-negotiable. And there is luxury sleep. So maybe there is a way to get rid of your luxury sleep and just find a way, can we extract what is the really core essence of sleep and just get it in a shorter time, and then we save at least some hours by not getting into luxury sleep.
Oh, I love this. Love this.
Yes.
I read recently about a genetic mutation whereby people, a small percentage of the population, I think the estimate I read was something like 2%, seems to function well on less sleep than most people do. And I immediately thought, okay, how do I get that genetic mutation? I want to be one of those people. Do those people just have lower requirements for obligatory sleep? Or do they just not do luxury sleep?
Maybe that mutation, I don't remember exactly what they found there and what's the function of the gene, but it could be a mechanism that simply monitors your time spent awake and asleep and tells you how much you still owe. Think about like sleep debt in this regard. But what if we find a system that we can trick to make it think that we have already obtained the sleep we are programmed to obtain, right? So normally you wake up, you actually don't know how many hours you sleep. You just feel, okay, I feel great, right? So what is it if we discover this mysterious timekeeping mechanism that counts time spent awake or asleep and make it run slower, much slower? And this is probably what can allow you to stay awake for much longer. This would be a really, really interesting kind of approach.
That definitely gives me something to look forward to. And I would appreciate it if your lab could get right on that and solve it for me in the next few months.
We are working actually right now with transgenic mice, which lose 3 hours of sleep every day. It looks like they don't know that they are sleep deprived when they're tired. They stay awake for hours and hours and hours, and it looks like they feel just great. They are fine. But in human terms, they would lose like 10 years of sleep in the course of their life.
Wow.
Span. So it's definitely not impossible. The more we learn about sleep and sleep mechanisms, the more likely that we'll discover what's the essence of sleep and how to tweak it, how to manipulate it to allow more flexibility in our sleep behavior.
And in the meantime, I'm abandoning all luxury sleep. Only obligatory sleep for me.
Good luck with that. Sometimes, you wake up like half an hour earlier and you feel miserable, right? So, and sometimes you sleep like extra 3 hours and also you don't feel great.
It won't surprise you that I'm also, well, I don't know what the right term is. I think you might call me an anti-napper.
Anti-napper. Oh,
I hate
okay.
napping. Hate napping. I have never taken a nap without feeling worse. And I've read a lot of the research suggesting that you need the nap to be relatively short. Dan Pink introduced me to the idea of the nappuccino, where you consume a little caffeine about 20 minutes before you want to wake up. I cannot process why anyone would ever take a nap and how that could feel good.
In my opinion, napping is very natural. Yeah, we sleep in very different ways. So there is no just one size fits all. Maybe you still haven't found the way of napping that would work for you. I promise when you discover this, you'll be very happy.
I think the problem is I don't want to find it because then it means I'll spend even more time sleeping.
Well, but you can use your wake time differently or more efficiently, right? Or maybe you will have some discovery, some great idea who to invite for your next podcast comes to you during the nap. And
I will begrudgingly concede that's a good point. I don't want to admit it, but you're right. It's just a nap sounds to me like the ultimate luxury sleep. If I don't need it, I'm not going to take it. But you're right. That doesn't mean it won't have benefits.
Maybe I should not have used the word luxury when I talk about sleep. Yeah, we need to learn how to enjoy it, and not everything is happening in wakefulness. Sleep by itself deserves attention.
I think the closest I've ever come to enjoying sleep is when I've had a really vivid, interesting dream. And recently, for the first time ever, I was consciously aware that I was dreaming while I was dreaming. I woke up from a dream. I remember being in the middle of a dream and saying, this is a dream. And I've never had that experience before. So I guess it took me 40-ish years to get there. Do you know anything about what drives consciousness during dreaming? I've read a little bit of research suggesting you can even induce your own lucid dreams. Would love to hear you riff a little bit on that to the extent that it's something you've explored.
Yeah, I'm jealous because I never had an experience of a lucid dream. What you're describing is a lucid dream.
I couldn't control it though. I had the awareness, but I still felt like I was watching myself play a video game as opposed to operating the controls.
This is an example where sleep can open the door to some different and altered states of consciousness. We are too limited by thinking that our life is spent in wakefulness. Even during unconscious sleep, sleep is something that's generated from inside. Also dreams. They're coming from your memories, from your experience, from your past. I think sleep is, as many other states, they are defined by the interaction with the environment. We don't exist in the vacuum. There is no such a thing as an isolated individual. We are constantly interacting. Sleep or hibernation. Hibernation is a state when you have completely abandoned your agency. You enter a state when you're in thermal equilibrium with the environment. It's all about the directionality and strength of our connection with the world outside. There's such a great variety of states which we must experience to live.
It's such an exciting perspective to engage with. Well, Vladislav, this has been a lot of fun for me. I remember when I was first getting into the psychology field, I read some early sleep studies, and they literally put me to sleep. They were just documenting things we already assumed to be true, which is useful science, but not the kind of thing that I wake up fired up about discovering. And you definitely have kept me awake during this conversation, and you've raised so many new questions and perspectives, and I really appreciate that, and I know our audience will too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adam. Yeah, it was great talking.
Same. Thank you.